Next slide, please. If you would like to turn on closed captioning for tonight's presentation, please click on the closed caption on your control panel. You can also adjust the size of the caption by clicking the arrow next to the Start Stop video, clicking the video settings, then accessibility, and moving the slider to adjust the caption size as needed. Next slide, please. All MBTA's activities, including public meetings, are free of discrimination. The MBTA complies with all federal and state civil rights requirements preventing discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, limited English proficiency, and additional protected characteristics. We welcome the diversity from across our entire service area. If you have any questions or concerns, please visit www.mbta.com/titlevi to reach the Office of Diversity and Civil Rights. Next slide, please. If you have a technical question about Zoom or the features of tonight's meeting, please use the chat function. Our technical assistant will attempt to troubleshoot your problem and help you as best they can. Next slide, please. Following the presentation, we will be having a question and answer period. During the presentation, all participants are muted so that the presenters can be heard. During the Q&A section, if you'd like to make a verbal comment, you can click the raise hand icon, or if you are calling in on the phone, you can dial *9 and that will raise your hand. I will call on your name or the last 4 digits of your phone number and ask to have you unmuted so that you can give your verbal comment. You are also welcome to submit a written comment that will be read in the Q&A box, that Q&A icon at the bottom. I'll repeat these instructions at the end of the presentation so they're nice and fresh when we get started. Next slide, please. So here's an agenda of what we're going to go over tonight. I'm going to start by giving you an overview of the program itself, and then we will dive into the existing conditions, looking at the proposed improvements for the drawbridge, talk about what we've been doing since we were last here together. Then we'll talk about next steps as well as context for the program, and then we'll go ahead and go into that question and comment period. Next slide, please. So just a reminder of this program as a whole. The Draw One Improvements Program is a replacement of the North Station Draw One Bridge, Control Tower A, and associated track and signal upgrades that are north of the Charles River. The project is currently valued at $1.2 billion. We did award STV a design contract in 2019 that was $40 million. The objectives, again, of this are to replace this very old, currently 2-span drawbridge and to phase it so that we maintain service throughout the construction duration. Other components, again, do include replacing Control Tower A as well as extending the platform to connect tracks 11 and 12 to the network. This meeting is focused specifically on the drawbridge itself. The other elements of the program are not being discussed in this presentation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our project manager, Carl Ekstrom.
Thank you, Katie. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight to talk about the Draw One Bridge Replacement Program. My name is Carl Ekstrom. I am the MBTA Senior Director of Capital Delivery Bridge and Structures Program, and I'm also the project manager for the Draw One Bridge Replacement Program. North Station dates back to 1857, and in the early 1930s, the new bridge structures, or they were new then, they're collectively known as Draw One, were built to replace earlier structures in the same location. So here we see photos of the existing condition of Draw One. On the left is a view of the current bascule bridges and the current Control Tower A. And on the right is a picture of an aging bridge caisson or support that's actually out in the riverway. Next slide. Draw One is showing signs of deterioration and aging. On the left is a picture of the framing system showing our deterioration and signs of previous repairs. And on the right, you can see pictures of the obsolete drive system in the existing machinery rooms. This equipment is a challenge to maintain and to keep functional to keep the bridge operating for navigational openings. Next slide. At Tower A, there have been 3 signal towers on the site in its 125-year history. The historic Control Tower A building, shown here on the left, was built in 1931 and once housed both track and bridge controls equipment. As you can see, the building has deteriorated over time. There are deficiencies in multiple building systems and damaged or missing exterior brickwork, windows, copper flashing elements. The building is currently vacant and does not, due to unsafe working conditions. Operations have been moved to a temporary current Control Tower A, which is shown here on the right, which is immediately adjacent to the waterway. And that building is manned 24/7 with a single bridge operator. Next slide. As part of the Draw 1 bridge replacement project, the scope includes replacement of the existing bridges with a 6-track crossing of the Charles River, which will consist of 3 vertical lift movable bridges, 2 new river tracks to allow for improved service on all the commuter rail lines into and out of North Station, and a replacement of the existing trestle structures out over the river between the shoreline and the 3 new lift bridges. Next slide. Here you can see a view of the proposed Draw 1 bridges at night. The team has been working with Rosales and partners and aims to ensure that the Draw 1 bridges will complement the existing landscape while also remaining both operationally compliant and safe for our riders in the boating community. Next slide. The program plans to construct a new Control Tower A building to house all of the rail operations and maintenance components, and to provide operation control of all 3 of the new replacement movable bridge spans. The design team has identified a conflict. Oh, sorry, wrong slide. Next slide. Sorry, get myself out of place. We're going to talk about proposed improvements. Temporary constructions will require the use of trestle work out in the riverway. So here we're seeing images of what the proposed construction site will look like when we get started. We will have a number of temporary works in the river and use barge equipment to transfer equipment and materials to the bridge site across the waterway. You can see in the lower left of this picture, there's an existing dock and ramp structure that'll have to be temporarily removed for construction access and replaced when we're finished with the bridge project. You're also seeing the extents of the existing western fender system that'll be partially removed to allow for better access of the trestles and also the barges. You can see in the per center of the picture, number 3 is identifying the location of our existing Tower A building, and then our temporary control tower facility is right adjacent to the waterway. There is identified at number 4. And as I mentioned, we're going to have a number of temporary work trestles. Go to the next slide. Just to give a better feel of what that construction activity will look like, here you can see equipment out on those temporary trestles and the erection of the first of the 3 framing towers for the new lift span immediately adjacent to our 2 existing bascule bridges and the associated steel framing that will support the trestle approach spans out onto the new bridge. Next slide. So let's just talk a little bit about what we've been doing as part of the project. We have been working on a federal and state coordination efforts. We have a NEPA environmental assessment that is ongoing, and part of the program tonight is to allow the public access to some of the materials that we've developed for that documentation purpose. We have been working with Section 106 consultation and tribal consultations as part of the environmental documentation. We've also been working with our partners at DCR on Section 4F impacts to the parklands, and as well as National Flood Insurance Program. Go to the next slide. So as part of the proposed improvements, we have identified an issue with the existing North Bank pedestrian bridge. That is a structure that was built by DCR 10 years ago. As you can see in this photo, in the upper right, we have a potential conflict or known conflict with the existing pier, which would not allow us to have a new railroad track facility coming off the new bridge. So we have identified that issue with DCR, and we are working on a means of dealing with that. And just to quickly describe that, we have that same pier is shown as pier number 3, which is the left existing pier in the lower image, colored in red, and that's our issue. So in order to remedy that, we're going to build a replacement pier 3 immediately adjacent to it, about 20 feet to the west, which is shown in green. And then we're going to go over to pier number 4 on the right, and we're going to also construct a new pier 4 to keep the span arrangement the same for the bridge itself. We're also going to construct a new pier 4A, which is shown in blue, which will help with the overall stability and performance of the bridge. As part of the work, we'll then demolish existing pier 3 and existing pier 4 and allow room for the railroad tracks underneath. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, part of the environmental documentation includes historic review, and our Section 106 process has been ongoing. This process is an integral part of the National Preservation Act of 1966. It identifies and assesses the effects of actions that may have on historic buildings or structures. And both of our basket bridges and the Tower A control tower, even though it's no longer being used, has been identified as eligible for the historic register. Therefore, they're part of this mitigation effort. So that mitigation effort is to resolve adverse effects and developing and evaluating alternatives that could avoid, minimize, or mitigate impacts on those historic resources. So I'd like to thank our partners at the Mass Historic Society, the City of Cambridge, and the City of Boston Landmarks Commission on their efforts to work with us on mitigating the impacts of this project on those elements. As far as a Section 106 timeline, we first notified those agencies through our federal partner at the FTA of a architectural survey and effects assessment back in 2023. We started meeting with those agencies on this issue in mid-2023, and have had several meetings and consulting party negotiations on the impacts of the project. Most recently, we met just last week, and we have ongoing meetings planned throughout the latter part of the summer and next fall to kind of resolve and finalize the project's memorandum of agreement with those agencies so that they have a continued role in the design development and actually some of the construction aspects of the work. So to thank them for their participation in the project. Next slide. So as far as next steps, the team is going to continue design of the bridge and elements of the project. We're going to continue to look for construction funding, and we're going to continue our efforts with community engagement, which is part of the reason we're here tonight, to talk about the project and gain some feedback from our interested passengers. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it back to Katie.
So we will go ahead and put this back up the screen in just a minute so that it will be present and make sure it is available. But to stay in touch with the project as we continue to move forward, the project webpage is www.mbta.com/draw1, ONE spelled out. Similarly, the project email is draw1, ONE, @mbta.com. Feel free to email that project email with any program email, excuse me, with any questions or comments that you may not be able to ask tonight or think of later. You can also use that as a way to request to be part of our distribution list for any email updates that we send out throughout the course of the program. So shifting to the next slide, it's time to begin the question and answer period. So I'm going to go a little out of order here and say for written comments, because I see a few are already filtering in. If you look toward the bottom and you see the Q&A icon, you can click there and submit your written question. I will go ahead and read it out fully, and we will address it if we are able. Similarly, if you would like to offer a verbal comment, you can click the raised hand icon with the hand, or if you are calling us on the phone, if you hit *9, it will raise your hand. I will call out your name or the last 4 numbers of your phone number and ask to have you unmuted so you can provide your verbal question or comment. So with that, I do want to look at some of these that have come in. And I know there are a few. So taking these first two together, which are very similar, I will read them fully out loud. We have Christopher Ferry writes, where is the pedestrian and bike connection required as part of the Big Dig mitigation agreement? MBTA needs to work with the DCR to include this connection included in the 1995 Charles River Basin Master Plan. Similarly, an anonymous attendee asks, when was the decision taken to drop the pedestrian crossing from the North Station Draw project? So again, I will reiterate that this meeting is obviously focused on the rail bridge replacement. But I can say that we are certainly committed to our continued collaboration with DCR and other stakeholders to explore alternative plans or strategies for improving pedestrian connectivity between North Bank Park and Nashua Street Park, and working together to find solutions that benefit the community while ensuring the successful completion of the Draw 1 replacement project. I have another written question, and then I'll switch over to some hands. Rajiv Maglani asks, will the width of the marine channel be changing? Carl, is that something you can answer?
Yes, I can. So the width of the channel will be changing. We have a study that has compared the Draw 1 location with the locations that are either upstream or downstream of the site. And the current bridge opening width is 65 feet. We have agreed with our partners at DCR and the Coast Guard to reduce that to a 45-foot opening width, so that it matches what is available to boaters upstream or downstream.
Thank you, Carl. Going to the raised hands, could we have Chris Casa unmuted, please?
Hey there, good evening. I understand that's on scope, but I want to thank you for your great work on this important infrastructure project. I want to speak up again, though, and strongly advocate for including a pedestrian and bike connection as part of this project. whether it's actually on this physical railway bridge itself, or if it's merely included in the scope of this project, the best time to build this is now. I mean, if you separate this out, it's going to create a really long delay, and it's going to be much longer permitting process, design process, and it's a much more expensive build. So figuring out how to do those two things together seems like it makes a lot of sense. And this is a really valuable connection for the T. So this not only is a necessary mitigation measure, as people had mentioned, as part of the big dig, but it's been in scope as recently as 2022, from what I can tell. It was in renderings and things like that. And the reason I'm speaking up so firmly about this is that actually really is important for ridership, because the commuter rail is doing so well, and it's recovering so well, and so many people come to North Station, and so many jobs are in that exact area. So if you can make a direct connection for pedestrians and cyclists, they have a 1-seat ride potentially to North Station, and then they can just walk maybe just a few minutes to Cambridge Crossing or to Canal Park, or bike 5 minutes to Union, down the community path extension to Union Square, or to other jobs in that area, or to Kendall. And that's such a strong desire line. So, avoiding that idea of having people to take, needing to switch to shuttle buses or switching to subway lines, all that stuff really will induce new ridership and make that critical connection. So I really hope that you see it. I completely understand that this is a really complicated, expensive project just to take care of the rail bridge, but I hope you do also see it as a really critical part of the T's mission of serving the riders and making sure that people have a really efficient way to get back and forth to the city from their homes. And so, that's needless to say, is like, of course, there's the other side of this, which is connecting the two sides of the Esplanade is extremely valuable. And that's not done right now. And that is a really short connection physically in the number of feet. So just in terms of thinking about those connections, I think this is really as powerful as the North Bank Bridge was, that, has really unlocked a lot of connectivity in the path network and helps people do things like travel where they need to go more safely and take care of the things they need to do, which is also a really important part of our transportation network, not just the train part. So I really appreciate all the work you're doing, and I hope that this isn't too long-winded, but I hope that you really reconsider this.
Thank you very much for your comment. I appreciate it. One thing I should clarify, and again, the MBTA is still very committed and has been meeting with DCR regularly about this project. I think that's something that should be noted about the pedestrian bridge. It is not possible to be physically connected to these three structures that we'll be building for rail operations. Obviously, that's a huge safety issue for both our railroad itself and pedestrians who we expect will take full advantage of this pedestrian bridge. Because it is going to be a separate structure that requires its own design and permitting process that involves working with the Coast Guard. And so it has to be pursued separately in that way. Additionally, just by the way of things being phased, it is not possible to build that bridge while the rail bridge is being built. So I hope that addresses some of the elements of both your comment and other comments that we do hear related to the program. I'm going to switch back over something you did mention that we do have a couple of questions about in the written comments, the North Point Park Ped Bridge, which does get used quite a bit. We have a couple. I'm going to again group together like I did earlier. Let's start with Andrew de Blasio, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing. Will the pedestrian bridge over the tracks be shut down during construction? If so, for how long? And then I know there was another one. I just want to make sure I get the right person here. Let's see. It might have accidentally cleared my screen. My apologies, but I know there was a second question about what the impact will be to the current, what do we know? So Carl, could you speak to the impacts on that current bridge, please?
I can, sure. To answer your question, yes, there will be some impacts to that bridge. We've identified the areas underneath the bridge that we're going to be working on. A lot of that can be done while it's being used by pedestrians, but there will be some shortened periods of time where we're actually changing the connection from one pier to the other and the like. So we've identified a total of a month of or 30 days of impacts or periods of time where the bridge will be temporarily closed to pedestrians, but those 30 days will not be consecutive, and they will occur in up to a 1 week period over a 6 month period of construction. So there will be detours and signage and proper notification so that people are aware of that activity and that inability to use the bridge for short periods of time. So we are looking to minimize the impact, but yes, there will be some periods of no traffic on the bridge.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to a raised hand. Jason Stockman.
Hi, thank you for hearing my question and for organizing this meeting. I wanted to echo what Chris Casa said earlier and say that, I work for Mass General in Charlestown. I need to cross the river frequently to go to the main campus in the West End. And I'm both a pedestrian and a cyclist and a transit user. And a lot of my colleagues come in to work at North Station, and it's actually quite challenging to get across into Charlestown on the locks. If anyone has used the locks, they know that they're often open because boats are going through. They're very narrow, they're slippery when wet, and they're really unsuitable for a heavy flow of pedestrians, and especially for bikes. So there's really a strong demand for another crossing, and it's really I hate to miss the opportunity to integrate it in with this project, although I know there are formal and departmental and logistical challenges involved. I want to cite another example where a community path was successfully built. It's the Somerville community path along the Green Line extension. There was a lot of resistance to this path initially by the various authorities and departments involved, but the community pressure and community enthusiasm for this path was so overwhelming that it was eventually added back into the design scope. And today it's a big success that has restored park access to a large swath of Somerville. And like the North Bank Bridge between Cambridge and Charlestown, it's hugely popular. So I use the North Bank Bridge every day. I would love to be able to cross the river without having to detour over the Washington Street Bridge. And if there's any way to cantilever a bike and pedestrian path along the side of the new drawbridge, it would really be a huge amenity for the public. It's not going to just be a niche, a small number of users. You're going to see thousands and thousands of users per day, and it's going to restore connectivity between these two areas. So if you just visit the locks on any time of day, any day of the week, they're just hugely congested and just vastly inadequate for the demand for connectivity between these two dense parts of our urban fabric. So I just I know this has been explained before, but I wanted to reiterate that if there's any creative way to integrate a cantilevered bike and pedestrian path along the side of the tracks, I think the public would be immensely grateful, and it would have a lot of utility, even if it came at added cost. Thank you for hearing my question.
Thank you very much for your comment, Jason. And again, I don't think anybody disagrees with how desired and how well used such a connection would be. Again, the one thing I would reiterate that I mentioned earlier, it is a tremendous safety issue, again, for any pedestrian or cyclist on the adjoining structure, and also our customers, passengers, and employees on the rail bridge, that it is not a good option for us to directly attach a pedestrian connection on an active railway drawbridge. But I appreciate all of your comments, and I'm sure we're going to hear more similar to yours tonight. So thank you. Going back to some written, let me see. All right, I believe Andrew de Blasio, I might have read another comment of yours earlier, so forgive me, I didn't put them all together. Will there be disruption to train service? If so, to what extent and how long? And Andrew had also asked a question, which I just addressed, as to why does it have to be a separate structure? In old renderings it was attached. So Carl, if you want to speak to the disruption to train service during construction.
Sure. So one of the goals and the the items that we're looking at for the project is to maintain current service levels throughout construction for rail passengers. That is why some of the extensive temporary works out in the riverway to give the contractor as much room to work and store materials as close to the site as possible is being utilized so that we don't take up areas of North Station or some of the trackside areas immediately north of the site. That said, we have a parameter that we can always, today we have 4 tracks across the river on movable bridges. So for all phases of construction work, we're going to maintain four tracks so that operations is not impacted. So our first major piece of construction is the new bridge on the west side of the existing bridges. That new bridge will be turned online, and then we can work on a phased approach of removing one of the 2 existing bridges, replace it in kind, and then we'll have, again, we'll always have 4 river tracks so that operations in and out of the station is not negatively impacted by the construction work that's going on.
Thank you. Going back to people with raised hands, Andy Riker, could you please be unmuted?
Okay, hopefully you can hear me now.
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, Andy Riker from the City of Cambridge in the Community Development Department. I basically have a comment. I think it reflects some of the other comments that have been made. But we are, I would like to comment on behalf of the city that we are very concerned both about the temporary effects about the construction on the pedestrian and bicycle connections between Cambridge and Charlestown. Hopefully that there's a full process to develop, alternative routes that really are as safe and comfortable as the existing structure. But in addition to that, we're really deeply disappointed that the pedestrian and bicycle connections are not progressing and have been removed from the project program. Obviously, there's a lot of coordination, but as other folks have mentioned, right, the upstream pedestrian and bicycle bridge crossing is one of the state's mitigation commitments from the Central Artery Tunnel Project. And it is something that both the DCR and the entire, I think, state agencies are supposed to be working on. So, I think other folks have spoken to this, but just to provide some facts, this upstream pedestrian bicycle connection is critical to providing another safe, reliable, and more convenient transportation option for peoples that are looking to cross the Charles River on foot or by bicycle to or from North Station, both on Boston in the North Station area, but also the North Point neighborhood of Cambridge. For folks that may not be aware, but I'm sure folks with MBTA are aware that the Cambridge Crossing residential and commercial development is well underway. And when complete, there'll be 2.1 million square feet of new commercial space and 2.4 million square feet of new residential space in that immediate neighborhood next to this connection. This new neighborhood does have the potential to be the kind of neighborhood where a large percentage of trips can be made by walking, biking, and taking transit, but only if it's conveniently connected to nearby destinations like North Station and the dense surrounding employment, shopping, and entertainment area. I think other folks have spoken to the community path extension and what that's kind of unlocked in this kind of northwest corner of the metropolitan area. And one day we actually hope that, the community path extension will be able to converge in the North Point neighborhood and then get across the Charles River to Boston, which just kind of expands the really safe and comfortable facilities. Really fundamentally, our comment is we really hope that all participating agencies can achieve consensus on a design that can be readily implemented and not too much in terms of being far off from the timeline of this Draw One project. So thank you so much for the opportunity to make a comment.
Thank you very much for your comment, Andy. We really appreciate that. Going back over to some written comments. Let's see. How many, an anonymous attendee, how many boats pass under the drawbridge on a daily or yearly basis, and were options other than a drawbridge considered earlier in the design process?
So I can answer that with historically, the bridge has records of being utilized over 2,000 times a year for navigational openings. So whether that's the passage of one boat or several boats that are lined up to come through, I don't have a hard count on the number of actual vessels coming through, but we do have records that indicate the need for thousands of openings in a calendar year. It's predominantly spring, summer, and early parts of the fall, where it's recreational boating is the main users of the river, but there are some commercial and both tourism and work construction activities that bring materials and equipment up the river. So hope that answers your question. So we are looking to build a structure that's more resilient and operationally reliable. So because of the number of openings that the bridge has to be exercised for, it's been doing that every day since 1930. It's just worn out.
So I have a series of comments here that I'm going to read through. I don't have more information that I can share, but just to make sure that they are heard by everyone. And I would encourage particularly this first series of questions from Ben Bays, since I am unable to answer these specifically tonight. If you would not mind, we will have them in our minutes, but to submit an email to the draw1@mbta.com, which actually, if we could go back a slide and leave that up for people so that we are able to provide an answer. I can make sure I'm not saying things out of turn, but just to make sure everyone is heard here. So Ben has questions in regards to a street blog mass article on the Draw One Bridge project, which made the following claims. The article claimed that one, there exists a legal obligation to fund a pedestrian walkway with the Draw One Bridge replacement as part of Big Dig mitigation, not the conflict with the North Bank Bridge. Two, the article claims DCR estimated the cost of adding the pedestrian walkway to the Draw One Bridge would be $3.3 million in 2019. And three, the article claims as of 2019, DCR had $30.5 million in Big Dig mitigation funds available for this purpose. So again, those are answers that Carl and I do not have answers to right this minute, but I did want to make sure everyone saw that they were asked. And if you could follow up with an email, we can make sure we get you an answer for that one. Some other questions that again have come up with this crossing we've been talking about. Evan Hoffman, I know that a pedestrian bike path was part of the original plan. What is happening with this part of the project? It is critical to the new Cambridge Crossing community to have much easier access to North Station for the new businesses and residents that live in East Cambridge and Cambridge Crossing. Andrew de Blasio, in some of the earlier drafts of the bridge, there was a pedestrian bicycle path on the bridge. What happened to that? I bike from the Green Line path to the south side of the river. Currently, I walk my bike across the Charles River locks, which I believe was mentioned in an earlier comment, because the North Washington Street Bridge and Museum of Science bridges are not the best to bike across. A bike path here would be really useful. So I think I've gotten most of those in a row. Andrew, I actually see that your hand is raised. So if we could unmute you, because you also asked, will these days be posted in advance? I'm not sure what that's in reference to, if you could clarify. Andrew, you should be unmuted. Oh, Andrew, if you're trying to speak, we're unable to hear you. Okay, let's Andrew, we will come back to you. So while we figure out that piece, if we could unmute Walter Willett, please. Can we have Walter unmuted, please?
Okay, thank you. Yes, well, let me be not quite so gentle as the other speakers were, because the point has been made time and time again that there must be a pedestrian bicycle crossing here. I was part of the advisory committee in 1995, and it was promised, and here we are 30 years later, and it hasn't happened. And it's just simply a lie that it's not possible to do this. We have great engineers here, and it's surely possible. You may remember that the original crossing, which is now the Zakim Bridge, was blocked by Cambridge. And as a process, we got a much better bridge, a much better design than the original crossing main bridge turned out to be with the Zakim Bridge. So I think we should ask Cambridge again to block this project until we get a good design that actually includes a safe, optimally designed bicycle pedestrian crossing here. It really is so critical. It's been made time and time again, and we don't want to be put off again. We are the taxpayers. We are paying for this. We want to see it.
Thank you very much for your comment, Walter. Can we see if Andrew de Blasio is able to be unmuted?
Hey there. Can you hear me now?
Hi, there you are. Hello.
Okay. Sorry about all that.
That's all right.
So I live in Belmont, and when the weather is nice, I bike into work right across the street from North Station. When it's not nice, I take the Fitchburg line. Like I think everybody else here, I would love to see a bike path. But I don't want, perfect to be the enemy of progress. I do think this bridge is necessary to improve North Station. And, I would love to have a bike path, but if it really is not possible, then I think it should still get built anyways. And that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you very much for your comment. And again, I think it is worth noting that while we are talking about the Draw One Bridge program, nobody is saying that a pedestrian bridge will not get built. And we continue to meet with DCR, and we will continue to do so to be as supportive as we can of their project. All right, let me go back to some of these written ones. I fell a little behind here. Okay. An anonymous attendee asks, what steps is the MBTA taking to ensure that the current design of the North Station drawbridge does not in any way, space grading, etc., preclude a future pedestrian connection? Carl?
So the simple answer is we are making sure that we are not precluding the construction of a separate or adjacent pedestrian slash multi-use bicycle facility. It just will not be mounted directly on our infrastructure. It'll be its own standalone crossing. So while we're not here to talk about that specifically tonight, that is the answer, is that we are making sure that we are not precluding that from happening. One of the reasons why it has to happen after this bridge construction is just the amount of construction activity we're going to have in the river during construction with barges and cranes and temporary trestles. The area immediately adjacent to our bridge project is not going to be available until the end of our construction period, or the back half of our construction period. So that's some of the reasoning as to timing and separation.
So speaking of construction, another anonymous attendee asks, how long will the North Point draw take to be constructed? I assume, does what you just said about the impossibility of constructing the pedestrian crossing while the North Point draw is under construction, that the pedestrian connection won't be realized for 10+ years? I know we're talking about a bunch of different structures that have a bunch of great names. I believe this question is asking about, again, the proposed pedestrian bridge that is not part of this program, but that we've been speaking about so much tonight. And so I think it was asking when and how long it would take to be constructed, kind of going along with what we've now been discussing with the phasing of the pedestrian crossing couldn't be built until after the rail bridge is completed. If that is the wrong interpretation of the question, please feel free to type in, but Carl, forgive me if I'm sure you've said this several times tonight, but do we have a projected construction time of construction, or how long it will take to construct the drawbridge that we are speaking of, the rail drawbridge?
Our estimates are a total of a little over 8 years,
Okay.
and we're not starting today. So
All right, we have a hand raised. Could we unmute Jen Rowe, please?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Hello.
Great, hi. My name is Jen Rowe. I am a regional planner in the Boston Transportation Department. And I want to thank first my colleague over in Cambridge, Andy, for saying much of, I think, what is a similar sentiment to what I intend to share too, and just that the city of Boston does look forward to the replacement of Drawbridge 1. We understand its importance and criticality to our regional transportation system and for enabling improved commuter rail and Amtrak service. That said, we are also alarmed that the pedestrian crossing is no longer in the scope. It's, as has been said many times, a central artery commitment, important connection in the Charles River Basin parks, and a valuable access route to North Station, especially as DCR considers closing the pedestrian path over the locks. So on behalf of the City of Boston, we would really like to see this essential item return to the project scope, and would be eager to collaborate on a safe multimodal design and trying to keep to the project delivery schedule, which we know is important given the deterioration of the existing bridge, and also happy to talk and strategize around funding. So thank you so much, and I really appreciate the opportunity, and I think you both have been doing an excellent job in this public meeting, so thank you.
Well, thank you, Jen. I really appreciate that, and thank you very much for your comment and your partnership with us as well as we work through this project. Okay, another anonymous attendee question. Is the bridge being constructed with future electrification of the commuter rail in mind?
So the answer to that question is yes. We are ensuring that we are not precluding the electrification of the system, either at the station or across the river or north of the site. But electrifying the commuter rail system is not the scope of this project, but we are ensuring that if it were to be implemented, it could be carried across.
Okay. So again, I'm gonna group a few, and for those of you who have been so kind, and again, thank all of you for being here, and we appreciate that you appreciate us having a discussion about this. Really means a lot to have a great discourse. So I'm gonna start with this comment from Joseph Nevins. Catherine, your response to the first two questions notwithstanding, I am still not clear as to why pedestrian and bike connections are not included in your current plans. We also have a comment from an anonymous attendee. From a layman's perspective, it seems that the obvious time to install a pedestrian pathway would be at the same time and on the same structure as the rail bed replacement project. I share the previous comments, concerns that deferring a pathway will delay it indefinitely. Can you speak more specifically to why it cannot be part of the same structure? And again, appreciate all of the work you guys are doing. There were a couple of other questions similarly about safety and being on this same structure. I'm just trying to group them all. Give me a minute, please. Why can't the bike path be added to the drawbridge? I can think of several bike pedestrian paths going over drawbridge, most famously Tower Bridge in London. That was Andrew de Blasio. An anonymous attendee, railroad setting considered more dangerous. If anything, the Craigie Bridge is much more dangerous due to the high volume of car and truck traffic. And Chris Casa comments from an engineering perspective. Could you provide more detail about why it is not possible to build the pedestrian part at the same time as the main rail bridge? Is it because the pedestrian bridge was planned? Excuse me. Is it because the pedestrian bridge that was planned was proposed as cantilevered? Would it be possible to build it simultaneously if it were part of the main physical structure rather than something cantilevered? New bridges are frequently constructed with sidewalks and paths. What is unique here that precludes it? So again, doing the best I can to address this with it obviously not being the topic of tonight's meeting. It is considered a safety issue to attach it to a very active railroad bridge. And again, as far as constructing them at the same time, as Carl has explained, what would have to be a separate structure from, again, a safety perspective, would require a completely different design and permitting process, including coordination with agencies outside of ours, like the Coast Guard. So I think I got most of those. If there are more that are come up, I will read them out loud so we can all hear them. But I don't have more to say on that particular topic. Let's see, what else haven't I addressed? Andrew de Blasio, how much will this increase the capabilities of North Station? And I'm guessing what you are referring to, Andrew, is the ability to provide more service and operational impact. So, Carl, if you want to speak to the program as a whole, I think this also does include a bit of the platform work that is obviously not what we're talking about tonight, but go ahead.
So yes, the currently at North Station, there is a stub platform F that's within the building proper. This project or this program would look to extend that out and connect the two adjacent tracks, 11 and 12, to existing track 10 on the Boston side of the river. They don't actually get out onto the river because of the adjacency of a building immediately to the west of the site. So the North Station would be having two more parking spots or locations for trains to be utilized into or out of the station, which would help with our overall operation and help to maintain service schedules and give the dispatchers the ability to, if we had any disabled equipment, it would give them an extra set of parking spots, for lack of a better term. So that is the North Station side of the things. On the north of the river, there are some track and signal improvements. If you've been through the site on a train and look out the window, a lot of the equipment and the wayside materials out there have been there for, some of it has been dating back 80 years since it's been refurbished and or replaced. So a lot of the track and signal work is just a state of good repair, and but we are providing our operations team with some more turnouts and ways to get from one track to another within the project limits that would enhance or promote a safer and more resilient operation of trains into or out of. The entirety of the commuter rail north side has to get across these two bridges. I mean, it's a funnel of 8 tracks of 4 mainline commuter rail tracks down to 4 single tracks. So we have, if you think of a main line as an outbound and an inbound, that's 2 tracks per main line. So we have really 8 mainline tracks coming into North Station, but they have to funnel down to 4 to get across the river. And that's what we're trying to make sure that we can maintain and operate trains safely into and out of North Station.
Okay, we do have a raised hand. Eric Thorkildson, could we have him unmuted, please?
Thanks. Yeah, another question to your list of questions about the pedestrian bridge. Sorry to to keep on going on about it, but it would be helpful for those in the audience to know really what are the safety issues? Is it, and maybe there are other issues too, having maybe to do with funding sources, but is the fear that a train might derail and go off the tracks and run over pedestrians and bikers? Or is the fear that pedestrian bikers would, clamber onto the tracks? The former seems unlikely and perhaps less likely than the danger of cars and trucks on the Science Bridge. The latter seems like it could be dealt with. Think about airports where you have total separation between passengers getting on and passengers getting off. Surely there's a way to keep people from getting onto the tracks on the pedestrian bridge. So we're just kind of all wondering this, really, what is it? So thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate your question and I will address it the best I can. Again, I would appreciate it, as I'm sure this captive audience will more than follow up for somebody who could probably explain it in better depth than me from the operations team. But I would just say in general, having an active pedestrian and cyclist pathway right next to our active and constantly running train tracks that carry, every single commuter rail train that goes over the Charles River is something that we all want to be mindful of. I don't know that I can be much more eloquent than that, and I apologize. I will take this back with the team and certainly pass it on. And along with what we've heard tonight, I am sure we will make sure that this is passed on to DCR and also encourage everyone on this call to continue advocating with DCR as well, so that our two agencies can partner on that particular project, which obviously is not part of this program right now. So I know it's probably not the most satisfying answer, but I hope that addressed it a little.
Kate, I can just add a little bit of context to that,
Mhm.
that gentleman's question, in that currently the navigational controls on the river mandate that the MBTA open the bridge for boat traffic almost on demand. So there's constant communication between our bridge operator and our dispatching folks that operate the trains in and out of the station. So when a boat approaches and requests an opening, the bridge operator communicates with dispatch to make sure that trains are either held or temporarily slowed down so that he can open the bridge, let the boat pass through, and restore service as quickly as possible. If we add the component of pedestrians and the volume of folks that are potentially going to be utilizing that pathway to every opening that we have to clear the bridge for, and the safety implications are just more than a challenge. So the fact that the bridge has to open thousands of times in a year for boat traffic and navigational issues, as well as the proximity of our rail operations immediately adjacent to it, it just does not make for a safe and enjoyable environment for everyone. And that's, I hope that kind of clarifies things a little bit. We're happy to bring some folks back at a later date and discuss it further from an operations detail, but that's really the crux of the issue.
So I do want to make a quick general comment, as I know we have a hand up and a couple more written questions. The driver for this meeting, aside from the fact we all know it's focused on the rail bridge, is our Section 106 environmental permitting process. So if in addition to the comments that we're talking about tonight, to the best of our ability, you have a comment specifically targeted to the Section 106 component of the Draw 1 bridge replacement project, please include that in your verbal and written comments tonight. And again, anything we don't get to tonight, draw1@mbta.com it is very active and regularly monitored. So before we go to the raised hand, I do want to address a written question from Jackson Moore Auto. I'd appreciate any clarification on what level of future proofing for catenary is being conducted. I believe we kind of addressed this earlier, but Carl, if you'd like to just kind of comment again on how this would
So one of
have
the-
any
yeah.
impact on that.
I think the one of the immediate issues we had was if we're actually raising the railroad bridge as like an elevator or a lift span, as it's referred to, anything overhead has to have enough clearance so that when the bridge is in its open position, stuff does not come into contact with some of the equipment and framing above. So we have made sure that we don't preclude the addition of future electrification, whether that's with catenary lines or I'm going to get out of my lane here, so I'm not going to say any more about battery electric buses, or trains. But the electrification of the system has been part of the design parameters so that we do not preclude it from happening at a future date.
Okay, and Walter has his hand raised again, so if we could unmute Walter, please.
Thank you. That I do appreciate that there is this issue of passable 24/7. And there were two other ways to get across that we did consider in 1995 that wouldn't be too hard to build. And one is basically under the arches of the Green Line that's on the Science Museum Bridge. That the major structures are there already. Another one is building an overpass over the locks, and there already is a bridge over the locks there that's used for controls, and it could be at that same level, which isn't too high actually. So I think the important point here is that what you've been hearing from many people, we urgently need a solution to the crossing here. We have a whole network of bicycles and pedestrian lanes coming into this area, and they're blocked. Now we've spent $18 billion making all the passages for cars over the Charles River here, and nothing for bicycles and pedestrians. So I think the message is we would really want to see at the same time, simultaneously, and not just some sort of theoretical push off we're going to do something in the future, but something concrete, designed and fundable soon.
I appreciate that comment, Walter, and I'll speak for Carl in this one instance. Otherwise, I don't. But we are both very aware and hear the concern and the passion for this crossing. And in meetings that we will attend with DCR, we'll continue to share these comments and those positions you mentioned. Actually, I admittedly had never heard of that idea before. If I could possibly ask you to type that in an email, because I would love to go ahead and share that with our colleagues at DCR, just so they are hearing as much not only about the need and desire for this bridge from the community, but also different ideas that were discussed at previous stages that maybe they aren't aware of. Again, I know I sound like a broken record, but we are committed and continue to work with not just DCR. Obviously, it will be a MassDOT owned bridge is my understanding. And so we want to do everything we can to partner on that. Unfortunately, as of today, it is not a part of the program that we are talking about in this meeting, which is not at all meant to be dismissive of any comments. Chris Casa, you also have your hand raised again. If we could unmute Chris.
Hey there. I guess I also want to ask more specifically, and I know that you may not have the answer right now, but you guys have made an assertion that it is not possible to have pedestrian traffic go on an active rail bridge. And I'm wondering, do you have a specific regulatory or engineering regulation that you can point to on that specific issue? Because I feel, you know, the bridge would have to come up for traffic, for boat traffic in the same way that the Craigie Bridge, you know, basically at the same frequency as what the Craigie Bridge and also the locks have to open for. So, you know, those three things are really in serial, right? So, you know, if you're coming in from the harbor, you're going through the locks, you're going through this bridge, you know, this drawbridge, and then you're going through the Craigie Bridge. So all three of those have different, you know, different modes that they have to do. They either have to raise or open or whatever. But the fundamental thing that's common among them is the frequency is actually the same. It's when the boats are coming through. So I don't understand what's unique about this. And if you can point to a specific regulation that would actually substantiate that, it would be really helpful to understand it and maybe see if there's a way around it or something. And I wanted to also kind of ask more. I think I felt my question was a bit dismissed before about the cantilevering question. I'm not sure if it came through clearly, but my question is it possible to actually build this as part of the physical main structure rather than cantilevering it? Would that change any of the characteristics or concerns that were raised?
So as far as the regulation, and I apologize, regulation is not my wheelhouse. If I could ask, if I could get back to you in a written way with that, because I would like to make sure I don't say any wrong numbers and things. I let other people much more intelligent than me handle that, but I will take that back and make sure that we address that along with you know, an FAQ that we can follow up with for people who are here tonight, who want to hear the follow-up and might not necessarily get that individual email, and also for those who are unable to join us live tonight. So I would ask kind of on both of those points, if it's all right with you, just to make sure I'm able to actually answer the question, if I could respond at a later time. Is that all right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, let's see. So I think we have some boat questions, which I don't, we're gonna find out if Carl knows the answer to, and Carl, if you don't, we'll go chat with our friends at the Coast Guard. Andrew de Blasio asks, does boat traffic get priority over train traffic? If so, why? This seems related. Jackson Moore Auto asks, is the MBTA seeking to change the time required between vessel request and bridge opening? Carl, are either of those questions you can answer?
I think I can simplify the first question about boat. The simple answer is that the navigation rules were in place before there was a bridge over the river. So the navigation tends to have priority over, that's why we have a movable bridge in the first place, because we have to allow passage of navigation. There are some periods of time during the day where our schedules are at higher demand for rail traffic. So we have, I'm going to say, notice to mariners, or there's navigational understanding that during our peak use of the rail facility, that the bridges will not be open on demand as much as they will be when there's an ability to do so. And those are like in the early morning and the late afternoon, synced with what was traditionally the peak hours of commuting traffic. So there might be an ability to kind of relax some of those restrictions, but not necessarily change them overall. So that's the function of the openings as being what we refer to as on demand. That the railroad cannot deny the passage of a boat because the river was there first.
Okay, and then another quick question from Andrew is the timeline for this project. When would a 100% design review be in construction? I believe, do we have a slide on this that we went through in the presentation? Meg, who's our tech guru on the back end, if we do, would you mind pulling that slide up? I can't remember if we had a timeline graphic, admittedly, but Carl, while she's looking for that, feel free to answer.
Some of the timeline is going to be dependent on overall funding for the project. we can't go out to construction without being fully funded. So we are working on that aspect as we speak. And once that ability to do so, it would be the release of portions of the work or all of the work. That's a strategy that we are working on right now with our design. '26 would be our target for having some construction activity. What that looks like is a little bit of a moving target in terms of the actual contract. Work packages, I guess, I'm going to leave it at that.
All right, we have Jackson Moore Auto has a hand raised. If we could unmute Jackson.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can. Hello.
Yes.
Great. Well, yeah, first, thank you all so much. I know that evening meetings are never fun, and I do appreciate you being here. I guess I wanted to follow up on my written question. So it's my understanding that generally this is Code of Federal Regulations that lays out opening requirements, but it's also my understanding that these regulations can be changed and have been changed. I know on the Northeast Corridor in New Jersey, there have been successful pushes that include congressional delegations and local leaders to change these rules to favor commuters when you have most of the flow being, potentially pedestrians and cyclists, we hope, but also obviously people in trains, no matter what. And I just have you talked to the T's government affairs teams? Have you had any conversations with Brett Moulton, who's a transportation champion, with any others, with the governor's office? I just want to get a sense if there's an attempt to change these rules or if it's just taken as a given.
So the specifics of this particular action, I would have to follow up with the external affairs team. I know that they do have regular coordination with the governor's office, with Congressman Moulton and the rest of the legislative delegation relative to a variety of topics. But again, this is one of those, if I could ask to just take it back to get a better understanding of what those conversations may have been.
Sure, thank you.
Chris Casa, I see your hand is raised. I don't know if it's left over from before, if you had an additional comment.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That was from before. Let me lower it.
That's all right. That is okay. All right. Let me see. I know we're getting ready to wind down here. There's only a couple of written. David Liu asks, is there a reason the footing for the pedestrian bike bridge cannot be built at the same time as the rail bridge? That'll accelerate the construction of the pedestrian bridge.
There is the potential of that, yes.
Okay. Okay, we talked about, we just spoke with Jackson about his question. Daniel Nonix, please forgive me if I mispronounced, about the opening for pedestrian bridges. The current bridge remains closed Monday to Friday during morning rush hour, 6:15 a.m. to 9:10 a.m. and evening rush hour, 4:15 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. If it were a street, there would only have to be 13 seconds of pedestrian clearance time for a 45-foot crossing. I believe that is just a comment. And with that, I do not have any other pending written questions. So I will give it a minute if anybody has a last minute question. I know we're getting close to 7:30 here tonight. If we could, Meg, if you don't mind going back to the screen that just had the contact information. Fortunately, this is an easy one. It's just draw one with the number 1 spelled out at mbta.com. I very much so appreciate all of you who have stayed with us for this hour and a half and have advocated vehemently on behalf of your communities. It is very important. We take all of these comments seriously and do intend on passing this along to our partners at DCR, MassDOT, as well as internally with us as we pursue this program and also continue to coordinate with DCR relative to the pedestrian bridge that we spoke about so much tonight. So with that, I'll do a last call. Sean Weller, if we want to see an FAQ with follow-up to many of tonight's questions, can we just send an email to draw1@mbta.com? Should we note anything specific in our emails to receive that follow-up? Great question. Yes, please just email us at draw1@mbta.com and ask to be included in our distribution list, which is a spoiler. If you ever email us there, you get on the distribution list anyway, and we will go ahead and produce that and push that out through our email list. So just let us know you like hearing from us, and we will get that to you in the next few weeks.
Yeah, and Katie, that'll also show up as a downloadable document on our website when it's available. So it'll be available to be found, and also it will send it out to those that are requesting access.
Yeah. All right, well, that feels like a really great way to close out for me. Again, thank you all so much for your time tonight. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to continuing the conversation about the Draw One Bridge Replacement Program. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.